Welcome to Storylab. In this episode, we're going to continue with Leti's story. After Sahara had told us about the history of sirens, Leti had come to the horrific realization that her parents weren't the unfortunate casualties of a tragic accident, but that they were targeted by a 3,000-year-old ancient order that vowed the extinction of siren kind. That truth, that gruesome truth, which would be overwhelming for even the most resilient adult, was too much for the young 22-year-old to handle. And, well, Sahara, in an act of mercy, sedated her before her body betrayed her and attacked itself with the very thing meant to give her life. That night in the dining room of Sahara's modern single-story home, she told me about her best friend, Leti's mom, and how, with her brains and siren song, she was going to bring a healing to humanity that we've all desperately needed. She placed a hot cup of coffee in my hands. I had always admired Sahara, her brilliance, her warmth, her passion for music, and the kind of simplicity that she embodied that can only come from cutting through all the complexities to focus on what's really important. She never struck me as anyone who was never fully herself at all times. No context switching, no compromise in how she showed up. She was Sahara, and there was no comparison. But as she sat across from me, that was the very first time I saw the inner workings behind the masterful composition that was Sahara Mayfield. You know, that moment when a friend really becomes a friend. It's weird that vulnerability becomes the catalyst. Like, I knew you were human before, but now I know how much of a human and what kind. I saw the woman who had lost her best friend. The woman that now struggled with how to keep her best friend's daughter alive. The deep brown ochre of her shoulders showed signs of wear from bearing all of these secrets. I asked her, how long do you think Leti is going to be out for? Sahara took a sip of her coffee. Until morning, I think, she replied. I didn't expect for her to make the connection so quickly, she added. But you were prepared nonetheless, I said. She didn't reply. And after we both took sips of our coffee, letting the silence sit at the table with us like an uninvited guest, that's when she said, I'm sorry. I met her eyes and I saw them glisten with moisture. She blinked away the tears and said jokingly, you know, to be honest, the only reason I brought you here was so that Leti actually felt like I was taking her seriously. I never thought that you would actually prove to be helpful. She grinned. I smiled a little crookedly. I knew what she was trying to do, but it was really hard to muster actual mirth and joy, especially with everything that had already happened. To be honest, I'm glad you're here, she said shortly after. All right, you ready for the cliche? That wasn't it, I replied. Half of it. The other half is, her voice cracked a little bit, but it was quickly smothered in her throat. I've had to manage this on my own. I have no idea if what I'm doing is right. I just know I need to keep that incredible young woman safe at all costs. After that, we just sat there and talked like we were back in school, except instead of talking about bit rates and autonomous responses to sensory stimulation, we talked about Leti and her mom, Valerie. About an hour into the conversation, Sahara gets up from the table and disappears into her room for a few minutes. Then she reappears with this beautiful green-stained leather journal. One of those ones where you have the strap wrap around the journal to keep the content secure. Val had so many of these. So did Leti's father, Ambrose. They were always writing. Val with her math and Ambrose with his history. Sahara opened the journal and flipped through a few pages. I'm going to give this to Leti in the morning along with all the other journals and things her mom left behind for her. But I wanted to share this with you. It's a little hard to read, but I think you'll get the idea. The moment I saw the page, I instantly knew what Leti's mom was onto. Pythagoras' circle of fifths. The Grecian father of the hypotenuse was author to more than just how to figure out the length of the longest side of a triangle. He also developed the system for how we read and compose music. And in Val's journal, she had expounded on his original premise to include additional notes that fit between the chords. She had expanded them based on different ratios. She figured out the math to a siren song, Sahara said before I could ask. I didn't even know when I picked up the journal and started pacing between the dining room table and the living room. She found the math behind the math behind the math. Only a siren could produce these notes, she discovered. They were layered in a way that suggested a second set of vocal cords that would work in a different pitch than the other set. Together, they would make brand new sounds. Just like if you heard one person singing versus many, the harmonies, the places where they intersect, expanded, broken down, and distilled. Notes between the notes. It was crazy. As someone who worked with the math of music, the work of Leti's mom was exceptional, groundbreaking even. But it would only make sense to someone who knows what it means. Otherwise, it would be simply disregarded as impossible. My mind reeled with what it could mean. Flipping through the journal, Val had theories. Some she tried and disproved, others she proved, and others still that remained untested. I could have spent hours in that journal alone, unpacking all of its secrets. This is crazy, I said. Yeah, Sahara replied, walking over to me and taking the journal from my hands. She closed it and wrapped it shut. It's what got her killed. That brought me all the way back down to reality. I thought it was because she was a siren. Val lost her siren song well before the unheard found her. Wait, what's the unheard? I asked. The assassins. Oh. Like what else are you supposed to say when the word assassin is just thrown around so casually? Sirens can lose their songs? How? Sahara sat back down. I'm not sure, but when you experiment with how to share your siren song with the world because of the good it will do, with an ancient group of mercenaries who will stop at nothing to silence you, you do things you probably shouldn't. How did Leti's mom want to share? What did my mom do? Leti stepped out from the hallway into the light of the living room. Her face was heavy with sleep, and she leaned against the frame of the hallway opening, her eyes looking between myself and Sahara until they found the emerald green journal. Leti's eyes opened wide, and she sauntered over to the table and put the pages to her face. Notes of summer lilacs and citrus with a hint of cocoa raised from them. I had noticed them before, but I was so caught up in math I didn't really pay much attention to it. Where did you get this? She whipped around, her eyes wide with shock and memories. Her voice carried a melody with it, soft and turbulent. From the things your mom left for you, when you discovered your abilities, Sahara offered. She hadn't had enough time to hide all the inner workings I had seen. She closed most of the doors, but you could still see a few had been left open. Where are they? Leti's voice was sad, happy, angry, frustrated, and tired, all at the same time. But every time she spoke, I felt the synesthesia of her voice creep up in the back of my mind. They're in a box, made just for you. Sahara stepped closer to Leti. Made sense that she would approach her with caution. The last time Sahara got close to Leti, she put her down with a tranquilizer. And, well, I was sure that Leti hadn't forgotten either. Where is it? Leti's voice immediately filled the room, harmonious and raging. In the midst of the euphoria, there was something fierce, chaotic. My vision blurred for a second, and I tasted ash on my tongue. When I could finally see straight, one of the dining room chairs had been knocked over and Sahara was on the floor, seizing. Leti gasped, the melody of her voice broken, and immediately Sahara stopped seizing. Leti slid to her knees. Sahara backed away, but only slightly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry, Leti cried over and over. It's okay. It's okay, Sahara replied with short, ragged breaths, wincing as she brought her head up. I knelt down to take a closer look at her. One of her pupils was blown and she had residual tremors. I'm okay, she restated. When your emotions are raw and unfiltered, your abilities can become unpredictable, Sahara shared as I helped her up. I'll tell you more in the motion detected, front door. The home assistant chimed from the smart speaker in the kitchen. Turning towards the mounted kitchen display, there were 3 figures. One in an all-black suit, walking up the walkway to the front door, and 2 others in tactical gear who we saw disappear out of view towards the sides of the house. As the person in the suit came closer into view, there was something strange about him. Why does his head look weird? Leti asked quizzically. Sahara's hand shot out at me and grabbed my arm with the fiercest grip. You need to get Leti out of here now. 5 seconds might have passed before the front door was kicked all the way in and the man in the suit stepped inside. As Sahara shoved us into the hallway leading to her garage, I understood what Leti meant. He had no ears, just scarred skin where his ears should have been. But that was all I could notice, before the glint of his sidearm, as he pulled it from his holster, caught my eye. A second before, a baseball-sized hole exploded in the door to the garage as Sahara scrambled to close it. All right, and that's the end of episode 4 of Leti's story. The math behind the music. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to like, subscribe, enable notifications, or if you're listening to this on the podcast app, to be able to follow the show so you can be notified when the next episode drops. Thank you so much for listening, and yeah, I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.